Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the SOPP. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kevin Bell, and we're talking about an issue that's near and dear to my heart, the home rule charter, especially here in Douglas County. As always, I have my amazing co-host, Betsy Cunningham, the one and the only, known by many titles. uh, we have a
Sure.
couple. We have a couple of people joining us today that have an interest in this. So, there's quite a number we've gotten to the thing. So, John, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm president of Community Rights Douglas County, and I'm on the board for the Oregon Community Rights Network. Okay.
Anybody else want to introduce themselves? I'm not sure how it's coming up on my screen. So, no.
I'll say hello. I'll say my usual hello. I'm Zach. I'm an historian, PhD student at the University of Oregon. I'm affiliated with the Institute for Social Ecology and longtime friend now of SOPP and friends. Always happy to be here.
And friends. I love that. Anybody else like to introduce themselves?
Okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm Francis, and I've worked with a lot of environmental groups in Douglas County, and I'm very interested in this subject here. So, hi, everybody.
All right, last call before we start diving right in.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Lori Wick, and I'm here happy to be with everybody and learn a little bit more about this topic. I'm very interested in this and bringing we the people to our county. So thank you.
Sweet. And Dane put his intro in. I think we all know you too, Dan. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Good to be here.
Awesome. So, I'll take the lead right now in this because this has been one of my interests that I've had for quite a while since I've heard about it. I haven't honestly been involved in it. It was before my time actually getting organized that the Home Rule Charter in Douglas County was being organized. And I just wasn't out of it. And I think that was with Betsy and John who were doing a lot of that. So, my question to you guys, well, at least John was, I know for sure. So, hey, John, would you mind giving us some kind of background to Home Rule Charter and stuff like that before we start tearing it apart and seeing all the benefits or whatever they want to call it?
Okay, I will. I don't. Yeah, I will. I will try here off the top of my head. The Home Rule Charter. Actually, about most of the cities in Oregon, Roseburg definitely, and I know a few others are based upon a home rule charter. Most of the counties aren't. There's a few I know. Jackson County is, Lane County, Josephine County, Clatsop County, and I think a couple up around Upward. Anyway, county-wise, what the Home Rule Charter does is you set up a charter basically upon rules and guidelines that the charter is that the city is run by, and you have your commissioners are basically come from different districts. So it's like in the one that we tried to pass, it was divided up. Douglas County was divided up into 5 different districts. One on the coast, Winchester, Reedsport. We had one in South County, one in the Eastern County, which was Glide and all of that area, and then North and South. Kind of, the main one would have been around Roseburg, Winston, I think, I don't know exactly where the dividing line was. And then the northern part, which was, Drain Yon, Akala, and I think Elkton. So each district would be represented by a commissioner, for one, there'd be one commissioner from each district, and that would give each area, their own representative. Where now we have 3 commissioners, and they're all from Roseburg. So, and the outlying areas feel really left out. So that was the big selling point. And as in the case with the cities, like in the city, the councilors really don't run the city. They just make decisions that are implemented by a city administrator. And that's the case in a home rule charter, a county that the administrator administrates public policy, and the commissioners meet to really decide what the county policy is going to be. One of the advantages of this is supposedly it gives them more time to concentrate on their own district, to work with the people in their district, to see what they want and what they need, and then try to get that implemented into county policy. And the day-to-day administration is they don't have to really worry about it. All they have to worry about is evaluating the city administrator or the county administrator, and make sure that he is doing his job. So,
Well, and I before this meeting, I looked up, home rule charter and, some of the aspects and applicabilities of why we should do it personally and why I believe in it. The first thing that popped up to me, Clatsop County was one of the counties that passed home rule charter. And it was, home rule is simply what the term implies. Voters in the counties decide how to rule themselves. We can go back a little bit more into the legality of what this actually means. But essentially, the county is run by state laws, and that takes precedence over our local ordinances. So, it's limiting our local control. You know what I mean? So
right.
Essentially 27 of Oregon's 36 counties operate under, state statutes rather than a local charter, which is something that we don't have. And that's why it's called home rules, because we at the House get to take,
Right.
The operations and do it. And so I know there's a lot of things and questions that come around it. People are usually confused when it comes to, the legal aspect of it. And I can say that because they say it's in a city thing. But, Oregon had this amendment to the Constitution, which I'm sure Betsy can talk about, that, allowed this stuff to be in place. Are you there, Betsy?
Yeah, and under the structure of state government, it was, initially all counties were, I think they call it a general charter from the state, and so had the state had a lot of authority over what the county could do or did. And home rule came about, eventually allowing counties to do that. Douglas County never did. And I don't know that the distinction is that one has a city manager, county manager versus, that separation. I think that those would be optional under a home rule charter, but it gives the county a lot more flexibility. There are still certain things that the state will have jurisdiction over anyway and can dictate what the county is, but that's enumerated in statute of what they would have to, but they have a lot more leeway in other things. And the big thing that happened, most recently here, was the term limits for county commissioners. That was, ruled that it was not proper, even though the majority of people in the county voted for it in a ballot initiative, that is not legal because we didn't have a home rule charter. So the home rule charter would give us the authority to do something like that. And I'm not even sure under the campaign finance limit laws. I think that I'm not even sure if that applies. I'd have to look that up, whether that is authorized to just home rule charter counties or for general counties to initiate even local campaign finance reform. So the big difference is really the ability to make certain government changes. And I think that when they did this, in 2017 was the attempt to change to a home rule charter. Most recently here, when I was looking up stuff, it also happened in the 1980s and then sometime before that, for Douglas County, apparently. And so it would give us advantages, and it could do exactly what John said. And that would be a great selling point, is to have district representation as opposed to countywide representation. Because we do hear over and over again, people in outlying areas feel disconnected. And although there's been promises by, numerous county commissioners that they would, put the show on the road and go to outlying areas, I can't remember that happening. So anyway, I am supportive of it, but what it's going to be is going to have to be decided by a group of people, because the charter could be changed in many ways. And it's analogous to having, it's a constitution, is what people say, that the charter is like a constitution. So we're creating our own constitutional government, and probably can do many of the things that we have talked about how to make it better, like the citizens' assemblies. That could be something written into the structure of county government. Now, they can't have the power that maybe a citizens' assembly that we're thinking about. They wouldn't, because ultimately there would be a conflict with the structure of Oregon government, as I've been reading it. If they had the ultimate ability to vote, because they're non-elected, right? So it could be that we could have a citizens' assembly, and what they decide to do on these issues that they're convened to provide input in, there could be a referendum, and then the voters would vote on what the citizens' assembly came up with.
Well, and I think it's a strong point to realize that, anything that we would do in regards to a county charter. I'm reading the comments here, and Larry was provide a link to the procedures for moving to a home rule charter. And so that would be, we would have to first pass the ballot initiative at the county level. And, there's actual I'm not sure if it's a precedent, but there are procedures and ways to do that laid out in Oregon law, that an initiative procedure can create a charter. I think Betsy knows it better. She was the one that was just explaining it to me. But
well, there's two procedures. One is in state law that says, in the Oregon revised statute, that talks about the convening of a charter committee, which is actually when the city of Roseburg a couple of years ago changed their charter, a provision in their charter, and they convened, and the city council convened a commission to determine what it was. It was pretty stacked with people who, were doing the charter change. It was a very small change. It actually was just removing the provision in the city charter that required the city manager to be a resident of the city, because the city manager that they had hired was not. And so they were kind of backing that in, so they didn't have to do anything about it. But that happened through that. And then there's some misinformation that it has to be convened in that manner, but there is the right to initiative to create a charter is in the Oregon Constitution. And so when there's a conflict between a state law provision or potential conflict in the Constitution, prevails. So, the procedure would be the problem. I think people know, but the people who put the people on this charter committee would be the county commissioners and the state representatives, as far as I've gotten through that provision of the statute. Well, if those are the folks, that are doing that, and it's the current ones that we have, that could certainly be problematic of who even the conveners are. And so if it's possible, I would think the best way to do about it is that we, as a citizens assembly, create the charter, ourselves, and do an initiative petition, because then we can write it the way that we want and don't have to worry about, we don't have to worry about the politics of who's running our area of state and county government.
And I mean, there's just going into the legalities of it. I think, there's a lot of options that can be presented by a home rule charter, not necessarily, there's the obvious ones that I've been hearing all over the county, campaign finance reform, geographical districts. There's also term limits. Those are the ones you hear pop up all the time. And Dane Zahner says, I think our county and better representation would be well received by our rural areas. Also, having more commissioners would definitely be a good thing for our country. I can't agree with you more. I think, the thing that can also be implemented with these things is, I'm so sure the attacks are, say I'm a pessimist, but as soon as I'm trying to say something, I'm always going to imagine the attacks, especially when we live in the county that we live in. And all that I can imagine is it's going to be so wildly expensive. How are we going to find the money? Blah, 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 blah. Well, frankly, that's something we can address in the county charter. No county commissioner can make more than the average, the county average. If that's $35,000, that's $35,000. And that's an incentive to bring up the average here. There's a lot of things we can add in there because, state precedents, we can't change state precedent. That takes the cake. But there are the things that we can address, like citizens assemblies, like more, representation throughout our county, which would be a great thing. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Well, Dane was asking about whether county administrator hired, but John answered in the chat, hired by the commissioners, and that's correct. That, that would be the structure you would want. And the whole idea, I'm assuming that when they did it in 2017, that, and I'm kind of favor this because there are maybe there are professional bureaucrats, public administrators. And although, that might make some people cringe, I actually think it's a good idea for have people who are trained. And in my experience, when you have somebody who actually has a degree in public administration, they kind of understand the responsibility of an administrator better than, let's say, someone who's hired who's an engineer, like our city manager is. Okay, her background is engineering, not, public policy. And I think that the problem is that it's a public administrator when they are educated about their role, it is to provide sufficient objective information for their bosses to make those policy decisions that John was talking about. But the potential to manipulate that, if you don't have an engaged elected officials, is a problem. But the way you avoid that is if the people are professionally trained and have some, integrity in that profession, that they know what their responsibilities are, and they're a much better resource for the administration of public policy. So it is a cleaner divide between that policymaking body or legislative policymaking body, like the county commissioners. Really would be better if they were just that. And, and then the administrative function, the execution of those policies.
Well, and I
that
think
just
that's the
makes
strongest.
government cleaner.
And I think that's the strongest point too, Betsy. It makes government cleaner, and we don't have all of the problems that we're seeing currently in our county. There's a big uproar about Chris Boyce arguing and yelling at people and how he's done that for quite a long time. And a lot of times, you know, it would be a lot easier to, just talk to a county administrator whose job is to actually, address these issues instead of, then they don't have an excuse to blow up, I can go talk to them. But at the same time, you're right, it makes things cleaner because right now if you look at the books right now, what we did with Andrew Rosales when we went over the county budget with one of our first episodes, it's not clean. A lot of questions come up from reviewing the budget. And at least with a professional, we might be able to balance the ship. We might be able to, see where the wrongs are righted and also see that, we won't be handing out too many handouts anymore to favored interest groups, and friends, because at that point, that'll be an administrative task.
Well, the administrator is susceptible to influence, so
Of course.
yeah, and so I mean he is, and it's created issues in other counties too. So it's there's always a politics involved with the position. So
and that's a good leads to our next question. I'm sorry to cut you off, but Larry asked a question. Betsy, please expand on your optional approach that avoids the politicians. I'm assuming that's the citizens forum that we go to a ballot.
Yeah, that would be an initiative petition by, citizens, basically who, I don't know how, I don't know what the initiative petition thing is. I know that you often see is 3 people, but sometimes initiative petitions in the state of Oregon are, one person can file a petition, an initiative petition if they want. So I would think that before any of that's done, that there would be an effort to really organize people and educate people about the issue and get people involved in, the kinds of things you could ask for. Then the whole charter would be drafted. It would like anybody, I don't know. I've been involved in initiative petitions on a statewide level here. So I don't know if other people have, but it's often drafted by people and a few lawyers. It's good to have a few lawyers take a look at it. And but the more people that are involved, the less likely that it can succumb to what the last one came to, which there was like the money spent to defeat it was like 10-1. And everybody, and then what, John Hanlon, our sheriff, became the poster child for, this is a horrible thing because it's gonna, take away your power. So, there's one is a practical thing. Somebody could go out and within 90 days or 6 months have an initiative petition tomorrow, but start that process. But I don't think it would be wise to not try to do that groundswell of work to explain it to people and also provide the options and see, make sure that everything you ask for, it can be asked for. And basically, if it's an initiative petition, it simultaneously will repeal the general charter that we have and then would create a home rule charter in its place.
Well, and I think
I don't know
that's
if that
also,
answered your question, Larry.
Yes, I'll have to look up more on initiative and referendum. I'm not familiar with the process. If there's a percentage of voters that voted in the last election that are necessary to pass it on to another level or whatever it is here in Oregon.
Well, the initiative petition, I think, is 6% of those who voted to get the petition on the ballot, right? Because that's what would have to happen is you'd have to get a petition created to get it on the ballot, and then the voters that petition. I think that it's 6% who voted in the last gubernatorial election in the county. So let's say we targeted 2027, right? Because it wouldn't happen any sooner than that. Then if we were looking at trying to do it by then you're going to look at November's data. And then that tells you that 6% what that, is in numbers.
You would be
And that's
you'd be looking at around 4,000 signatures.
Is that what you guys did?
Yeah, we were a little over 4,000. But it's not as easy as you think. We were very lucky. There's not a lot of good places in Douglas County to get signatures. We started like in June. We got that many in about 6 weeks, which was pretty amazing. And we hit Music on the Half Show pretty hard. And I was back after the pandemic at the Half Show trying to get signatures for the Measure 118, the organ rebate. And they didn't have the crowds then that they did it. They did in 2017. So that was so, but we hit that hard. We got a lot there. You got to be very, very careful because everybody's watching you, and they don't want you going to the crowd or anything like that. So you got to, and there's not, you can't, you got to play the events too. Hopefully you can hit the events at the right time. One of the best spots we hit was the Myrtle Creek Festival they have there. Where in July, and we got a booth there, and we surprisingly got a lot of signatures there. So, but it isn't easy. A lot of people, you really got to go out of your comfort zone to do it. It's not easy going up and asking somebody you don't even know if they want to sign this. And it's even harder when you get rejected, and sometimes people aren't very nice. And you can't let that bother you. You have to just keep going. So that was it. A lot of like the petitions, the initiatives now, I know for Measure 118 and for the Watersheds Initiative in Lane County, the only way they could get those, like Antoni needed over about 150,000 for 118, and the people in Lane County, they needed over 14,000, and they had to hire people to do it. And you get the right person, and you're paying them. Some of these people can get a lot of signatures for you, and they're actually better than the average volunteer. So,
hey, John,
yeah.
What kind of a training program did you have for the volunteers, and what was the elevator speech?
We didn't have a real great training program. I think we talked about it and tried to give some pointers and some advice. The elevator speech too, it kind of depends on, I think the person, the petition, the signature gatherer and who they're talking to. Sometimes you just gotta ask them if they've heard about the initiative and if they want to sign. The best advice that I've heard on all the petition gathering is just to keep the message short and direct, and don't get bogged down in an awful lot of questions. You're there to get signatures. If they want to argue with you, then you say thank you and walk away. And sometimes they'll want to bog you down with some ridiculous questions. I had one guy outside of Walmart really get violent with me. That was the same time that they were getting the petition going to for Kate Brown to get her recalled, and he asked me if I was going to sign that. which had nothing to do with the home rule charter. And I said, well, it isn't out yet. I haven't seen it, so I can't answer your question. And he got really mad and started yelling and screaming. So you never know what you're going to experience. And just before that, I had approached a guy that was he had a gun. He had a pistol in his holster, and I kind of was hesitant to ask him. And I asked him, and he signed it without any hassles. And then this next guy, he just goes absolutely ballistic. And I'm thinking, I think I was lucky because this guy wasn't packing heat. I don't know what would have happened with him, So anyway,
Well, and I think it's, it's everybody's different experiences with everything, because I've signed petition. I was also helping Antonio on 118 when that came around during the pandemic. And, when I stood outside the library or places like that, it was, a lot of people didn't really care. They would give me the vote saying, I'll probably vote against this on the ballot. But they didn't care. They at least appreciated that there was a direct democracy action. And, there are those people out there who do just appreciate that. And my response to Larry, I know this question wasn't directed to me, but, the great elevator speech that we can use this time is, do you like how much our current county politicians are spending? Do you feel represented in Reedsport? You know what I mean? There are 3 different elevator speeches that came to my mind. John's right, for every person and place you have. But, there can be one, especially in these options, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity now to have one out in the county. Because right now, I think, John Hanlon did himself a disservice when he said there would be less representation. Because frankly, I mean, when you look at it, it's we have a general charter implied onto us by the state instead of what we establish as a county. And there was a question that Larry put down for us, which was, would it be beneficial to use the home? Oh, Joanne asked this. My bad, Joanne. Would it be beneficial to use the home rule charter drafted in the vote in 2017? My personal opinion is it would always be nice to get more input and have another like citizens forum at the library. And, Dane is right. This isn't a partisan issue. This is a representation issue. It would be great to just reach out to people, because I don't personally believe in a lot of issues that he stands for, but I know that I could see Steve Hammersman, who has also a bad experience with the county commissioners, taking a stand and saying, yes, I would love more representation in our county. I would love all these different things that are implied, because, what we have right now is just anarchy, essentially. Well, it's not, but.
Well, keep in mind, there's 2 very important issues that could probably be done in a charter. And Joanne, the one that they did in 2017 wasn't strong enough. It didn't change things, as fundamentally that it needed to. The representation and the city manager is just one step, but we need campaign finance reform. This election shows, that what Tom Kress was up to in this campaign year, 75,000, from one donor, and actually a total of much more than that from the same donor, but I think it was in the time frame. Lori probably can correct me if I'm wrong. And that's one thing that for the state, campaign finance, 68% of Douglas County voters actually, voted in favor of campaign finance reform. So it's clearly not a partisan issue. The other thing is they also pretty good margins got term limits for county commissioners. Okay, that was a portion that was ruled basically illegal because we didn't have the home rule charter. But there was a majority that had voted for that, or it wouldn't have even become that question. And so I think it is, again, a nonpartisan issue. And it's one of those things that, we can try to separate, the party politics, if you will, and keep in mind that, almost the same number of people are non-affiliated voters in Douglas County as are Republicans. And so, there's a huge potential, and times are way different than 2017. People have a lot of reason to be angry about,
And
their understanding of
I hate to
transparency issues.
And I hate to cut you off, Betsy, but I just looked up how much that the ordinance for term limits passed in Douglas County. It was 69% to 31%. And that is outrageous. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Any elected official would love that type of mandate. You know what I mean?
And those two things could be in a home rule charter. And I want to just remind everybody that if we had had a home rule charter in 2017, well, not 20, but whenever they did that campaign the term limits, none of the current county
2015.
commissioners could run. They've already had 2 terms. So none of them could be running for office right now. So it is something that, is another point, I think, in the favor of trying it in the near future. And the organizing, I've expressed this publicly before. The problem with the 2017 effort is people wanted to be stealthy about a major issue that needs a lot of votes to get passed. And there are some political missteps in political organizing and what they could do. But John is right that the average person, it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, even in, party politics. That's out of most people's comfort zone to go up to strangers and say, hey, you want to vote for this, or will you sign this? That's a challenge. But if enough people really are enthusiastic, you can get them enthusiastic enough, they will come out of that comfort zone.
Could someone provide links of a couple of templates to county, I guess you're not calling them bylaws, they're called charters here?
Yes,
Could are there a couple that you particularly like that have components and elements that would be workable here in Douglas County, just so we can see the format of it? And I'm sure a couple other counties probably have 6, 8 pages. Is that the
yeah. Yeah, we could find them. I know that the one that Douglas County did was based on one
Clatsop County.
Clatsop County.
Yeah. I think that was the most recent county in Oregon to pass the home rule charter. You can probably go to their webpage and find it on there. That's what I would recommend. I have a copy of it somewhere. I'd have to download it somehow or something.
No, that's all right.
It's all right.
That's all fine. And if you just give us the names of those counties, a couple of counties, we can look
Yeah,
them up.
and one of the things about Clatsop, their charter was fairly, it wasn't real long, and that's probably a key. You want to try not to keep the charter very, 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 very complicated, because the more complicated it is, the more people are going to get turned off by it. So that's where I would start to look.
Does the justification for the charter lie in, I should say the foundation for it lie in the county's comprehensive plan? Is there a connection?
What do you mean, like the comprehensive plan for land use, or what?
I'm sorry. Usually there's a progression to come up with bylaws or or a charter, and it starts with the vision, the comprehensive plan of the entity. Something that the people decided, the bigger visions, the bigger goals, and a few strategies, and then from that rolls out the charter, and from that rolls out the ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. So the comprehensive plan is usually the basis for a lot of these documents.
I don't know, maybe Betsy, basically what we did was this, use the the one, the charter from, from Clatsop, a county. And once they're adopted, they can be amended. So they're kind of a living document that could be changed as needs and requirements come along. Josephine County has amended theirs a ridiculous amount of times. So that's the ones I know of have just like Clatsop County too. That was just an initiative, I brought forth, by the residents. So it was what the residents wanted.
And so I posted in the comment section a 2024 presentation the League of Women Voters was presenting about Home Rule Charter, and it lists the 9 Oregon counties that have adopted Home Rule Charter: Benton, Clatsop, Hood River, Jackson, Josephine, Lame, Multnomah, Umatilla, and Washington. So if anybody would like to look those up, and it gives you kind of like a loose understanding of what that would be at the same time.
Thank you. We'll take a look at them. Thanks.
Well, and traditionally, you're right, John, that in most initiatives, you try not to make them very complicated if the focus is done by a small group of people, right? I mean, it's often a much smaller group of people who do a people's initiative petition. So if you're not educating people beforehand about the subject matter, which I think is more possible in Douglas County, in a county with 110,000 people, than it is in some other areas. It may be, an opportunity to try to substantially change the charter to what, the community rights has been promoting, right? The concept of, how you can restructure government. But ultimately, what you put forward is going to be a pragmatic choice, based upon politics and, where you think you are at the time that it happens. So I think it's a good idea to educate people about why we have a shit show in Douglas County and tie it to the fact that we don't have home rule charter, and if people are angry at the county commissioners, they could have been done with him by the end of this year. Right. So I think if more people are, getting uncomfortable about what they see, that they may be willing to say, yeah, let's just, let's get involved and do it. And it probably does, it might take more time and energy to do that. Absolutely. But it took a lot of time and energy for you guys to do what you did in 2017, and you got your ass kicked, right? So it can't be any worse than that. That's the way that I would look at it.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think you guys are right, Kevin, in that you've got to kind of approach it to the community before you put it out there. And one of the advantages you have now that we didn't have then is you already got 4 commissioners that, candidates that, have established this, going out to the, meeting in the community, with workshops and that. And that's a really good, that's what you need to do. And they've already, have established that. That's just something to follow up on, and use their knowledge and expertise that they have gained from doing that to, branch there. We needed to do that more. And quite frankly, we didn't have enough people. Zane on one of his comments was that we should have somebody at all the events. That's true, but that wasn't possible for us either because we didn't have enough people.
Well, let's not put this all on you guys. I was just recently going through the 2017 article that was written by Rachel McDonald about the failure of it. You know, the Home Rule Charter failed by roughly about 15,000 votes. And, you know, you can just see in the big picture when it's there, it's stopping extreme environmentalists. It was literally all it is it was an emotion play. You know what I mean? It was about good governance. And now it's turned into, you know, about another referendum about the spotted owl here, which it had nothing to do with that. You know, it was literally just about, you know, 3 paid to 5 volunteer, the simple things that would have helped us, especially after the closure of our county charter, of our county library. You know what I mean? So
Right.
like it don't talk, the deck was stacked against you. And that's one of the things that I think should be addressed in this new campaign, you know, is that they really did play a dirty campaign. And that's why Dane Zahner has a really brilliant point when he brought it up, and one we've been talking about in the past, which is, no, these things are across county aisles, and we need, you know, party boundaries, things like that. And it's good to get a wide diaspora in here, especially if we are talking about like citizens assemblies and things like this, and how we want to do this as a way of getting a county charter written in the first place. You know, a citizens assembly is full of all the diaspora of people, regardless if we believe with them lockstep or not. And that's also the power that we can get into it, because at the past, you know, they labeled us as an extreme environmentalists at the point when it wasn't that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. They took advantage of. They actually had their game plan already figured out. And I know that they were doing a polling before because my son and daughter-in-law, I got a call. I mean, this was when it was kind of tied up in court too, and they were already making phone calls, doing a polling with county residents, because my daughter-in-law, I got a call, wanted to, you know, to know how how she felt about the charter, how she felt about the charter. So they already had their game plan, you know, ready to implement, and we had to wait to, well, we were waiting to see what the courts were going to decide before we, you know, before we got going. And as soon as the courts, I gave us the okay, well, they were, you know, they had everything set to go. They had their battle plan all set.
Well, and it's exactly that, because I mean, spent, you know, 10 out, you spent for every $1 you spent, they spent 10. And I think that's, you know, because it changed the overall nature of the county government, and it meant a change of the political system that we have. You know, there would have been people to stand up to the timber interests and things like that, because more people would be able to see that, you know, hey, my family might have made money in it, but my grandpa broke his back when he was 60, and now he's living on welfare for the rest of his life, and we've been poor ever since. That's at least my family story in regards to the timber capital of the world. You know what I mean? They break you to use you, so you're a cheap instrument. You're nothing more than a tool to them for income. You know what I mean? And that's the shame of it. And that's what I think, a thing that county charter, it doesn't address the fundamental issues of, you know, the corporations are going to use us as tools and see us as nothing more than dollar signs. But it does start the system, at least from the local level up, of, you know, we can push back. And I mean, now we can say, hey, you know, don't log the frickin' parks. Don't log the, you know, we don't want you out on the coast spending $10 million. And if you do, use it to upgrade the sewers first. You know what I mean? There's things that we can go along with it that provide more representation for our county. And it seems like a small step right now, but those small steps, like you're saying, John, they've changed the Jacksonville charter several times. You know, this is the first step into a long series on a journey that takes us up the mountain. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You've got, yeah, I mean, you've, even if you got the signatures and you get it approved, then you gotta face legal challenges. So that was an obstacle that we had faced because they're gonna contest the initiative in court. And what that does, I mean, we were able to get somebody to donate to pay for the legal costs that we occurred. But it'd been nice if we could use that money, on the campaign.
Well, 100%. And I think, and that's also the hard part about politics in general. You got to have a thick skin and you got to know how to ask for money. And none of us like to do that because, in our society, it's not communal. You know what I mean? It's not like that. And, we're all struggling when it comes to just everyday meats. But, these are the things that provide direct democracy. Zach, your hand is up, so I don't want to keep you waiting too much longer, bud. Sorry.
Okay. I've only got a few minutes, and I didn't want to leave without dropping in my 2 cents. Um, Something that's come up a bit in this conversation that I want to reiterate with my historian hat very, very much on is that that moves for home rule, which is decentralizing of state power, affording certain state powers to local governance. We always need to be wary that it can backfire. That a home rule charter could be established, hypothetically, and despite such success, without the accompanying efforts of establishing new popular institutions for political institutions, educational institutions, social and economic institutions, forms of new mutual exchange and material care for our neighbors. Without those things, home rule can easily bring about a new form of parochial politics and empower local notables who are already a thorn in our side. So at the same time as we should, as we work toward a home rule, it isn't just a singular problem. I think to Betsy's earlier points, it does need to have that assembly component, an alternative political body or bodies in the cities of Douglas County, as well as for Douglas County on the whole, that can step in and replace the existing city council system through the process of establishing a home rule charter. Or at the same time as doing this. Because what we don't want is new autonomous powers from the state to be delegated to, local old boys who already are a pain in the ass.
I agree with Zach. I don't know if you guys been following what's been going on in Lane County. They have a home rule charter, and you think Lane County's a rather progressive county, but it's not. They have their commissioner that's the chair of the BOC now. He's I think his last name is, it's ironic, Lovell. Lovall. He doesn't Lovell. I think his name.
He's a big real estate guy.
Yeah. And I think he can be best categorized as a Christian, a nationalist. Am I not off base on that one?
No, I've been also following along with that story, and I can agree with you there.
And he showed up at a 2020 Black Lives Matter protest in Springfield packing an AR-15. And right now he did a state of the county speech in January and kind of ripped some of the commissioners and got in very religious messages and everything. And he's been attacking some of the commissioners, and they had a commissioner meeting and they voted 3-2 to censor him. And he has since gone to court and filed a lawsuit against them for living in his First Amendment rights, and also for suing him for damages. So
I'm not sure that has anything to do with home rule, okay?
well,
I've-
but it is a home rule. It is a home rule. It is a home rule county, and that doesn't keep you from not getting these idiots in office, especially if they come from another he comes from Springfield, so the other 4 districts, they don't have any they don't have any vote on the guy, so he's
well, everything could backfire. I mean, the reality is you don't control, but we don't control it now, right? No. From my perspective.
No.
So, it is a risk. Absolutely. I agree with you, Zach, 100%.
I wanted to clarify that when I say it's a risk or it could backfire, I mean that would be the case if there aren't simultaneous efforts to build other forms of politics along the way. Because without popular education, without popular political institutions, without popular forms of economic exchange and direct, immediate, like without a home rule charter, immediate forms of local governance that are already being practiced, like through what some would call direct action. Without those kinds of forms, then we are risking, if we're putting forward home rule charters alone, then we are risking the danger of local notables who already hold significant power on the municipal level being further empowered. So I think it's a yes and problem. Yes, home rule charter, but what also needs to come along with that are other kinds of institutions that we build along the way. Because without that, then we're only furthering anti-political tendencies that are pretty dominant in Douglas County.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think that the idea even of the Citizens Assembly, even under our currently constructed state government authority, is to have that people's, paying attention to what's happening, right? More engaged. So no matter what their role is, if they're there all the time and are getting involved in the issues, it's a safeguard. It's, really a better way to build a safeguard to make sure the people that, we do elect are doing what they should.
Larry's hand's been up for a minute.
Yeah, John, not to ask for specific names of people, but in the last effort for home charter, who are the organizations? Who are your partners in a broad sense, demographically or organizationally? And looking at a future effort of this sort, who would we need to add to that list of partners?
We didn't. I don't think we had specifically any specific groups. Like, it was a lot of just individuals coming. We did we did get some help from the Democratic Party. It wasn't kind of a direct help. One member of the Democratic Party, a couple of members actually rented a house for us to use, as an office, just so we would have a separate place to hold meetings at, and kind of keep us away from the Democratic office. It was more this individuals from different groups helped us, and there was, I don't know if we got any specific endorsements from any groups. A lot of groups in Douglas County were very shy of endorsing it. That didn't mean their individual, members, weren't for it, but the groups were. Most of the groups really didn't want to come out, and endorse it, but they wouldn't discourage any of their members from helping us. So it's, but what you need to do this time is what we're been trying to do other things, and that's trying to get, especially like the BIPOC groups interested in helping us, and that's kind of what our thing in February, with we're organizing a project was try to get different groups together and to find a common ground. So it's, anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but we didn't really have any specific group helping us. The Democrats probably did as much as anybody, but they were but they were low key about it. They kind of kept us at arm's length, but they provided some resources in that for us, and which was nice, so.
Melissa, your hand's up, unless you have another question real quick, Larry.
I just wanted to kind of just build on what John was saying, that I think in terms of future efforts, community rights is in a better position because we are doing so much outreach and trying to do community coalition building. And we did have some success with that in February, and we have plans for additional events and to try and grow our coalition. And so I wasn't in Douglas County in 2017 for that effort, but I think that right now we are already seeing some of our outreach efforts pay off. And also that there's this big group called Indivisible, and I'm a member of that group too. And so that might definitely be something that we would consider as well. So I think I'm not sure, everything that went down in 2017, but I know John's been working really hard on coalition building, and I think that we're starting to see that pay off.
Well, and I think that it's going to be a group from a lot of people, because I think it should be, watersheds. It should be, indivisible. It should be community rights. It should be the Democrats. It should be the Republicans. This should be a nonpartisan issue that we should be able to take as a group. And I think the most powerful thing that can be happening, because I do understand, speaking as a political term, why they stayed away from it in a red county, the Democrats did, because, again, this is not supposed to be a partisan issue. And if they see it too close, then immediately they're going to rip on that fact. But I think the thing that should happen is we should all, if there was steps to be made, which I think there should be, is that there should be a community forum. We all talk about it in person and start actually holding those around the county and start getting up the support for having these, and then get the groups to endorse the effort that we've all put in.
I don't know how many groups you would get to endorse. I can probably pretty much guarantee that the Umpqua Watersheds would not endorse it. So they might have some members that would help, but I think you're right, Kevin. And if you want to do this, I would say whether it's after May or after November, however the elections go, then that's when you should start. You'll have some momentum going as a result of the elections, and then you should start after that and start building, on what's already been, been done, and you have that energy that you can build upon.
I really respect your opinion on that, and I kind of agree with you on that. And it would be an opportune time to kind of start it after the elections, but also that there should be community discussions around the county about it, and there should also be, you know, it should be what I want everybody to take away from this meeting is a somewhat not only better understanding of the home rule charter, but also the inspiration to talk to their friends and their groups and say, hey, these are great things that should be taken up by us as an example. Because I mean, yeah, I think I hesitate to be any lead person on anything nowadays. But with saying that, there always has to be someone, and if someone doesn't step up, I think, you know, but somebody has to, groups of people. But I do think the momentum's there right now, and that we all should just take the information out here and go take it and spread it. Because right now, you're right, there needs to be information building and learning about the subject. Because right now, people, the 2017 measure lost because of disinformation. They lost because they were outspent and they were told lies that they would not, this was a less representative form of government, that it was the extreme environmentalists coming to take your rights away. When it wasn't. It was, a concerned bunch of citizens right after the county libraries closed, and they wanted to do something about it. And I think that's, the lesson we should take is learning and spreading and then organizing. What is it? Educate, organize, agitate in that or fashion. Betsy, am I getting it right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think what could SOPP's role in all this could be is that we just continue on with these podcasts every once in a while. And maybe you're right, we do go to, Dane was saying that, to underrepresented and ignored areas of the county and, maybe even interview them. Because I could imagine 5 or 6 people out of Reedsport who've told me they don't like the county commissioners because they don't feel represented. Or 5 or 6 people who are on the different side of the aisle who could say they super support campaign finance reform, and that's why they would support a home rule charter. I guess right now, the idea of this podcast was just to put it in people's minds because it is something that should come up, and we do have the momentum right now coming out of this. I mean, I have not seen this is a nasty election. Don't get me wrong; I've seen nastier elections for Douglas County Commissioner, but I can sure tell you, I think Boyce is scared attacking the little old ladies and going onto the Facebook as much as he is just to frickin' rip on everybody. You know what I mean? And I think we have people with personal experience who can speak to that. So, it's just cruel, the current system we have. And, I can respect the fact that the county charter is a double-edged sword. We have people who would post about defending Second Amendment rights after a school shooting instead of, thoughts and prayers with the victims. No, and so we already have people, in my opinion, who are right Christian nationalists who, frankly, do not support. I mean, we had people who wouldn't even come and shake President Obama's hand when he came out after the UCC school shooting. And I mean, like, we have, it's a terrible travesty.
Joanne brought up a really good point that she believes that it's important to do a laser focus on getting new county commissioners elected. That's absolutely true, because that could, even under our current system, make our current system a whole lot better if the people who are in there weren't in there any longer. So that is the election coming up. Good point, Joanne.
Very good point. And I mean, even if we are able to at least do something with one, we would make a world of difference. And I have a lot of hope and faith in the current candidates that are running right now. That's a very great batch of people. Melissa, I saw you pop in. Do you have anything you'd like to say really quick?
Well, this is a strange question, but some of you know that I had sent an email after last week's county commission meeting to Chris Boyce, and I sent it to the official county commission email address. And instead of responding to me from that, he stalked me and found me on Facebook Messenger and started communicating with me like quite a bit, which I found concerning and completely unprofessional. Do I do anything with that information, or do I just sit on it? I just don't understand why a county commissioner would seek out somebody through Facebook Messenger unless he didn't want a record of that communication. Why he
Well,
wouldn't
let me
respond
just tell
to
you, you're not, we're live on YouTube, so there's no sitting on it.
Well, I've been very public about it on my Facebook page. And some of but I just found it, I'll be frank, creepy. And very unprofessional that it wasn't responded to through, like, as a response to my email. That it went through Facebook Messenger, that he went and sought me out.
Well, let me tell you a couple of things. One is, I did see it on Facebook, and I saw what Nick had posted regarding, you should do it through the official and respond there and send him forward the messages he sent in the messenger in that to the official. I wholeheartedly agree with that. For one, we did the public records law last week, and I would tell you that no matter whether it's in a private messenger, he did it as a county commissioner and it's subject to the public records law. So it is you can get it from doing a public records request, even the messenger one. But I would, if I were in your situation, I would translate it back to the official communication you want to have with them, because I've had various communications with a number of county commissioners and other officials, including Chris Boyce. I don't want them contacting me in any other way than what I give them. I think that is over the boundary of propriety when it comes to them contacting you. Us contacting them, they're fair game.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
um,
just found it, I couldn't believe it. I was really astounded, and if, anyway, I wasn't sure what to do with that. It was just very strange.
Well, and that does open up the legal aspect of it too. Like, I was following along on the Facebook thing too. And is there something legal that can happen? Because it seems completely inappropriate. And, like, it does seem like intimidation, frankly. I mean, he had the email, why stalk the Facebook? And, Melissa, you are so strong and resilient. And I just say, keep up the good fight because, you've hit something right.
Well, all it was saying how I found it really inappropriate that at the end of the meeting, each of the three commissioners had a chance for sort of closing remarks, and we were talking about this 20-acre land use change. And Freeman and Kress both focused on the measure, but all Boyce did was chastise the people in the audience, his constituents, because we dared to do things like shake our heads. So I said I found that really inappropriate, and that if he couldn't handle that degree of criticism, maybe he needed to rethink his role, and that I thought that that was a disservice to Douglas County. So I must have hit something, because then he came after me. So yeah, it was the whole thing was, I just couldn't believe, it was very surreal.
Well, and I think, Joanne has a good point. I think you go to some sort of press because it does feel completely inappropriate, like the Oregonian or the News Review, or because, I mean, a county commissioner acting in this regard it seems inappropriate. And that's why I asked Betsy, legally, what the heck is there to do? Because this seems inappropriate.
Well, there's in theory, the idea that by exercising your free speech or even your movement, right, in the public meeting, and then to do something like, if they did go after you, then say basically you're violating my First Amendment rights. Who's going to do that except for suing them? Nobody, right? I mean, the reality is that, but sending a letter to say, I think this is inappropriate and it seems retaliatory because of me, expressing my dislike of something the county commissioners were doing. But the fact that I think Joanne is making it public is a good idea. A letter to the editor would be great. I'd be interested to see if the news review published it. But I think, Kevin, you just said the Oregonian. I would reach out to the Oregonian. Once in a while, they are very interested in what we down here are doing when it gets pretty bizarre. So I would.
I
I'll have
would,
to get my back and find my inner strength because as much as I hate to admit it rattled me at first, then it made me angry. So I got to stay with the anger.
well,
I just laugh at him if that helps. You will get to the point where you just laugh at the stupidity that we have here, and him want to be in the buffoon he is. My God.
well, I think,
Yes, and if you're watching, Chris, yes, I did. I was rude just now.
I think too that Melissa was like the new one at the commissioners meeting. He had heard most of us speak before, so his thinking is too maybe she's a vulnerable, so I will go after her. And I told this story before to some of you back about 2020 or so. The Oregonian, they printed that article, well researched, about our county commissioners, about how they have misspent the ONC money and everything, and they actually spent a lot of time and money paying the county for their, for the amount that they wanted to get all this information, and they had documentation and everything about all the fun trips that Tim had to Washington D.C. and everything. And anyway, about a year later, so I'm up in Corvallis at the state meeting, and there was a environmentalist there works out of Corvallis, and he was at the meeting, and he goes after the timber industry up around, for Oregon State and up around Corvallis and all that. And I meet him after the meeting, and I'm just talking to him. I told him I was from Douglas County, and he said, "Oh, you're from Douglas County. I had an experience with one of your commissioners," and I thought that was rather odd. It turned out that the online part of that article, where the public can comment, he commented on it. It was under his name, and he, was a very anti-timber a comment he had and everything. He woke up the next morning and he has an email from Chris Boyce ripping him apart. So, and he was kind of, well, how did he do that? Well, he has the timber industry behind him. They had this guy's name. They checked him out and they got his email. So you aren't the first one that he's done that kind of stuff to, Melissa. So, I mean, even out of the county. So, who knows how many times he has done this. So, but it is intimidation. That's what he's trying to do.
Well, and I just want to say, Melissa, because I can understand the feelings you're going through, and I just want to again express my gratitude and my admiration to you. You're doing a great job, and don't let them rattle your chain. And if if there's anything at the SOPP that we can do to support you, let us know, because keep up the good fight. You know what I mean? Don't let Chris Boyce or any of them bully you into thinking that a citizen shouldn't be allowed to present public comment to their elected officials, because that's essentially all this is, and it's public transparency.
Or make faces, stick your tongue out, do any damn thing you want, except probably not cuss at them, and actually probably not talk from the audience. That can get you 86 out of the arena.
I just like to say that this meeting on last Wednesday for this hearing, of course, the results were expected, but I was very pleased that we had 9 people show up, and two of them are county commissioner candidates, and I know that Lori spoke, and we had seven people speak, and before, like about 2020, when they were pushing this through, we didn't have that many people. So it was very heartening to me to see people, come and speak against it, and that was good. And I know the other 2 candidates have been commenting about it on Facebook and that too. So at least you guys are aware of what they've been doing, and that was the point too, was for you guys to become aware of what what these commissioners have been doing and how they really want to abuse the Oregon land use laws, just for the benefit of their wealthy buddies. So I was glad.
And aren't they likely just to get kickback from Luba again?
I don't really know. They had an attachment to the agenda that was about their response, and they added amendments trying to address what Luba had said before, and then they had a lot of kind of Oregon revised statutes, what they said justified what they were trying to do. Yes, it could happen. I know somebody like Shelley from Friends of Douglas County could maybe answer that question a lot better, but I was talking to her Wednesday too, and I think she's pretty confused and too about everything they've done. And I asked her how many times has this been remanded back, and she said I don't really know right offhand. So it's yes it could, and it could get appealed even after Luba, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to go on, and then if it goes to case by case basis, each one of those cases could probably get appealed to. So fortunately, we got some good groups like 1,000 Friends of Oregon that are, that have been fighting this, and they will continue to fight it. So, and the Friends of Douglas County, they're a very small group, but they are worth supporting. They work with 1,000 Friends of Oregon, and they're very good and they're very knowledgeable. So we should be very lucky that we have them here, because they have made a difference around here. So
yeah, I have seen them a few times, and when they've shown up to protest certain issues related to this kind of thing.
Yeah,
I used to go to such meetings some time ago. Regarding Joanne put an incident about Chris shutting down a meeting while he was speaking because he didn't, or Joe Ross was speaking, I guess, because he didn't like audience behavior. And then totally understand the intimidation scares many. This is Dane. Specifically seems to be towards women. And I would agree that was my take on it, just given the pattern of, what, he gets kind of cranky, but he comes, you know, at least the last time read some of his rantings about his religion, you know, believing that women are something that they're to be taken care of. And I read that as AKA second class citizens. So you better, you know, not be a woman. But I think there's also good enough evidence that he's a equal opportunity offender from time to time. So, but I agree with you wholeheartedly, Dane, that it's a good time right now to make more and more people aware of how he behaves. And it's, you know, it's cool. You know, people say, oh, well, that person's so nice. He didn't do that to me. Well, doesn't mean he didn't do it to me. Right. The reality is, you know, and particularly sociopaths might be particularly good at disguising, you know, their personalities, and how they behave. And you know, it's the problem is not if his friends like him. The problem is when he behaves that way with people who disagree with him. And as I mentioned, I think on a Facebook page he was, you know, on, that's not good for a public servant. You know, go behave that way with your own, you know, whoever. Go live your life, but you really shouldn't be in public service when you do that.
No. And I told this story before to some of you about when we were doing the home rule charter, we had actually the city of Winston held a little discussion about the home rule charter. And we were invited in, and Boyce was there, and he was his obnoxious self. He was taking over and just not letting anybody get in a say or anything. And the chair of the Winston Chamber of Commerce, who was running the meeting, basically told Boyce that this is a public meeting. Everybody's entitled to be heard. And he basically told Boyce to shut up and sit down, and he did. And that I have admired the guy ever since. And that's what some people have to do. They just have to, you know, they can't let him act like that.
Anything else? I just want to, from last week's episode, I did post a link to the stuff that Francis sent regarding the BLM. Is it BLM or Forest Service testimony that's due tomorrow?
BLM.
The BLM,
Yeah.
yes. And there's a lot of pages around that you can just plagiarize off of if you want.
Yeah, yeah. And also I posted the newsletter article that Chuck Willer did, as well, if people want to take a look at it from last week's episode, because it's, you know, as John said, it's kind of like we have to quit cutting trees. And, you know, when you ask people, you know, Kevin's age or, you know, the environment, you know, I think, you know, the ones we hang around with, they're smart enough to realize the environment's the big issue. You know, it really is. They see that is, you know, the existential threat to their future. And so I think it's critical that that all these organizations start acknowledging maybe we should quit cutting timber. I think there's a compelling argument for that.
Well, there's a lot of timber that we can cut ecologically, especially in the managed plantations where it's just planted too damn thick and we can go in there and thin. I mean, there's a lot of that work that needs to be done. And if you thin in those overstocked plantations, it's really beneficial for the trees that are left.
You know more than I.
And there is a fair amount of that going on right now too. But that's about the only thing the Forest Service is doing these days. The BLM is the bad guy. It's going after the native natural forest that's never been logged before. And in their new RMP, they want to double what they're doing. So it's a bad scene.
Which isn't good enough
Yeah.
for Chris, which isn't good enough for Chris Boyce. So.
Well, since the county gets what, 50% of the proceeds,
Right.
they want more cutting.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that's the focus of Chuck's article in the newsletter, right?
Right.
Is the fact that you need the carbon sequestration from those forests.
Yes, absolutely important. Yes.
Yeah, if that's all you add, if that's all you put in your comments, that's great.
Yeah, go for it.
That's the most important thing you could say.
Yes.
That's a good point, John, because the one thing I try to encourage people on any kind of, supporting, even if people write to me and I don't even want to copy and paste that, I'll do 2 sentences because really oftentimes it is a big deal. 2 sentences, at least it gives people the numbers of how many people are saying, no, we don't want this, or yes, we want this.
That's important. The numbers are important. Even if you write 2 sentences, yeah, you're a number.
Yep. Anybody else have anything else and go want to bring up?
Well, how about the protests on
That's
Saturday?
right.
What
I
time?
could do that. The one in Roseburg starts at
Yeah.
noon. It's
Yes.
on Stewart Parkway, beginning just past the hospital toward Edenbauer by the Cancer Center, going down just before Red Robin. And we do have a whole safety team. We've done lots of training this time, so we feel very good about our safety team. There's also one in Reedsport that starts at noon by the bike park, I believe, 1500 101, Highway 101. That's noon to 2. There's one in Canyonville in front of the City Hall / library. That starts at noon. Of course, Shades of Blue will be in their usual place on Garden Valley by BLM. And then I think there's also one in Elkton. I don't have the specifics on that, but I'm pretty positive there's one in Elkton too. So you shouldn't have to drive too far in Douglas County to find a No Kings event. And you don't have to come to Roseburg.
Anything else?
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out today anyway. This has been a really successful episode, and we're definitely going to have to follow up with the home rule charter issue. There's been a lot of interest expressed not only in this episode, but, around the county in general. So I think this is something that deserves ongoing facilitation, a vote, and public input. So stay tuned. You can make the world a difference, and I hope to see you guys next week.